Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and we've got something super cool today, something I've been hunting for quite some time, and I have to give a shout out and a thank you to my good buddy Perry and his son Nevin for helping to hook me up with not only the figure I'm most certainly anticipating quite greatly, but also hooking me up with another round of these super cool cups again from 7-Eleven. You can see I got all of these cups all over again, as well as the straws, and that is super cool to be able to get another round of these because they are incredibly cool and definitely, again, some of the coolest kind of Jurassic related cups that I've seen in a very long time. So again, a massive thank you has to go up to both of them for helping me to get a hold of all of this stuff, but specifically what is included in this box. And as you can see, when we come up here to the top of the box, you can see that this is obviously the Mattel Dreadnoughtus Mini. And this also shows you every figure that is in this particular wave of the minis, which there are some really cool ones actually. As a whole, I would say this might be one of the best waves that Mattel had put out for quite a while. Definitely some really neat ones in there, but there was also a wave that was kind of shown off that featured some really neat new figures for the Mattel line that has not shown up yet, that did also include the Dreadnoughtus, but I have not heard of anybody finding that wave yet. But again, I've been looking so heavily for this Dreadnoughtus ever since I had heard that anybody had found one. I've been looking everywhere for it, and I actually came upon this wave one time at one store, and of course all the Dreadnoughtus were gone, and the entire box was pretty much annihilated. So I was really quite sad that I didn't get it then, but luckily I now have it here, and we can again see the packaging. Looks pretty cool, but it's pretty much the standard when it comes to these type of figures. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the tape off of this, and then we'll bring it back in and pull out our Dreadnoughtus Mini. And wow, that is so much bigger than I was even expecting it to be. You know, you would think I would have already been expecting a pretty large figure considering it is a Dreadnoughtus, but that actually even surprised me with how large this is. And you can see it's very like standard Mattel-like as far as the way you kind of apply all of the pieces to the figure. And I think it's a safe bet to say that that is the largest Mattel minifigure that we have had so far, which is definitely really cool. But man, that Dreadnoughtus is fantastic when it comes to a mini. It also might be one of the best minis that they have ever produced, period. And then you can also see the, again, kind of like little checklist in here on the inside showing off everything in this wave, which I at this point definitely have everything. Now thanks to Perry and Nevin for helping me to get a hold of the Dreadnoughtus. So when we bring the figure in and we start up here in the head sculpt, you can see the head sculpt looks really quite nice. Definitely very nicely sculpted. Not much in the way of paintwork outside of the grayish tone of color for the primary body. There is like a little splotch of a lighter tone, kind of like the light tone that we see for the striping that ended up right there above the eye, but that's about it. There is painted eyes though, which is at least nice. You can see they are painted with a black. We have the mouth in an open position. We can see the teeth on the inside of the mouth, but unfortunately no actual paintwork for the inside of the mouth. As you begin to move down through the neck of the figure, you can see again this light tone pickup here on the back of the neck, and that does stripe and pattern down through the neck really quite nicely. It definitely shines quite nicely as far as the lighter tone playing off of the darker grayish tone of the body color of the Dreadnoughtus. You can also see that the skin texture is extremely impressive when it comes to the actual fine detail. We have the throat moving along the underside of the neck right there. As we move down into the body, there is articulation in the neck, but it's really only a swivel, and I think that's the only big downside that I'm going to probably find for this figure when it comes to the articulation in both sides, because the pieces have to be applied. Well, that popped out really easily, but because they have to be applied like this, there's no real way to create any sort of like up and down motion. The figure is very, very flexible though, which you can see, which again would definitely allow some nice playability with the figure because it is so flexible. It's definitely, again, like a rubber, which is what a lot of the newer minis are compared to the older material we used to have on the minis previously. Technically, I guess there's a slight bit of wiggle room up and down and left and right, but not a whole lot. Very minimal movement there. But as you move down again, you can see the body looks really quite nice. The actual skin texture moving back into the body of the Dreadnoughtus itself is incredibly impressive as you move along. We do still have more of the light tone that actually travels along the back here and patterns through, and you can see it's basically just all over the place. And it does actually lead out onto the tail. Sadly, not the whole way, but it does head out into the tail at least a little ways. We can see the rib cage of the dinosaur, also the musculature as you move down both legs. We can see the elbow there on the front leg, and then of course the foot sculpt leading down, no painted nails, which isn't even a remote thought, I would think, on a minifigure. But you can see the same thing again for the rear foot, and again the skin texture is just so nicely done. I'm definitely going to keep my fingers crossed that at some point I run into this wave eventually again, so that I can grab another one of these, because I would really love to be able to repaint one of these. I think it's just definitely worth a repaint. There is, of course, articulation in the tail. Again, it's just a swivel. Yeah, you're not getting much anywhere else as far as like up and down. Again, the patterning moving out into the tail, the detail looking really quite nice, as you do have by far the longest tail we have seen on a Mattel Mini the entire time these figures have been out. I would say it's definitely just visually by far one of the best minis Mattel has ever produced. Again, coming down from the head sculpt on this side, you're not going to see much difference from side to side on something like this. The paint looks the same, the sculpt looks the same. As you move into the body, that's where you'll see the biggest difference, and that is the fact that the legs are further apart on this side. Again, a little bit too bulky, I would think, as far as this rear foot goes. That's probably the biggest problem as far as the overall appearance of this one, because outside of that, I think it looks really nice. And again, the same type of detail, same impressive detailing and paintwork the entire way through. But that is absolutely as epic as it gets when it comes to a Mattel minifigure, and is actually only the second time we have had a Dreadnoughtus released from Mattel. But as far as a size goes, for a length from the tail to the snout, you are looking at about 8 inches or just a hair under 20.5 centimeters. And then for a height, about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Golovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day Human Being next to our Dreadnoughtus Mini. And you can see again, it's definitely got a really good size to it, especially when it comes to being a mini. It may not be super obvious when it comes to this comparison, but if we bring in a different figure, like the Brachiosaurus, you can now see how massive the size difference is between the Mattel Brachiosaurus and this Dreadnoughtus. You can also see how much better the actual sculpt and fine detail is on this new Dreadnoughtus compared to the Brachiosaurus. Like, that is honestly a night and day difference, and I really hope to see that same type of impressive fine detail on all Mattel minis moving forward, because I feel like that's one of the biggest things that kind of holds Mattel back when it comes to their minis really being impressive, is the fact that the detail is never nearly as impressive when it comes to the minis as it is on the main line and stuff. And, you know, when it comes to like the Captives brand, you do get way more impressive fine detail usually on those figures. So it is nice to see Mattel catching up when it comes to that on their minis. We also have a sauropod from the Captives toy range as well, which clearly the Dreadnoughtus absolutely towers over. And then when we even go back to the older minis from Mattel, which were larger than the newer ones, we have a Parasaurolophus here, you can see that even that mini again is significantly smaller than this Dreadnoughtus. So Mattel absolutely knocked this mini out of the park. The sculpt on this Dreadnoughtus is gorgeous, and maybe even better than the actual mainline release that they had out, because again, I feel like the detail somehow looks more crisp on this one than it did on even the original, which is very impressive and also says a lot again about the quality of this mini overall. It is without a question a figure worth repainting if you can find one. But that's the biggest problem that lies within this figure, is that it is quite scarce and quite hard to find, it seems. Now, it may become easier to find as time goes on, but as of me filming this review, this one has been an absolute nightmare to locate. So again, thank you so much to Perry and Nevin for hooking me up with this one, because I was pretty much pulling my hair out trying to find it. But again, the sculpt is absolutely phenomenal. phenomenal, looking quite similar to the original release, but again, higher quality, I think, when it comes to the fine detail. The paintwork is also decent for being a mini. There's not a whole lot to it. You really only have the patterning moving along the back, the grayish tone, and the black eyes, but it still looks really good, and the fact that the paint does run out into the tail is a nice touch, of course. You know, when it comes to minis, you can always use more paintwork on the Mattel minis, but for what it is, again, I think it's half decent as far as that goes. Not much in the way of articulation. You really only have a swivel in the neck and tail, and again, some of the older Mattel minis had more when it comes to articulation, but then some of the older Mattel minis didn't have any articulation at all, like the Brachiosaurus we just saw. So you got to take the good with the bad, I guess, and say even though the articulation isn't as impressive as it probably could be, it's still not bad. And again, the fact that it is so large for being a mini is also quite impressive. So if you are interested in this, I believe my buddy found this at Walmart. That seems to be where most people are finding it. So again, keeping my fingers crossed, you guys can locate this and add it to your collection as well. And like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.